for coining that long ago. It is Thursday, July the 10th, 2025, just so that we are specific. And we are here live in the Bleacher Report app to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. And if I have configured everything correctly, I know we've messed around with this in the past. We are also live on the Blog and the Boys YouTube channel. This is our Bleacher Report show because it's Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm live every Tuesday and Thursday in the Bleacher Report app. And again, I think that now we're live on the YouTube channel also, which is very, very, very cool. So if you're on YouTube, what's up? Glad to see it. Obviously, this show is accessible on demand on the Bleacher Report app as well. It's accessible on demand on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. We're on the march to 30,000 subscribers over on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Please like the video. Please tell a friend. Those things are very helpful. And obviously, you can follow me on any level of social media. All right. So today I want to do something that I've done in the past many times. It's kind of an annual exercise and something that I think is very helpful and very interesting with regards to assessing and evaluating the roster of this team that we're all cursed to love. And it's I want to look at the Cowboys roster, and as you can see in the title, I want to determine who the Jenga piece is. And by that, I mean, who is the most important? You are obviously, I would imagine, familiar with the, I don't know if we can call it a board game, but the board game, the party game Jenga. Jenga is where you build blocks of time. In fact, let's put a screen, put something on the screen here so you can kind of get a grip, because maybe you don't know. Maybe I'm giving you too much credit here. The idea of Jenga is you want to build the tallest possible tower that you can. So let's go ahead and do this. Here is what Jenga looks like for anyone who is somehow unaware. The way this game works is you have a finite amount of blocks and you want to stack them up, and you want to build the tallest tower that you can. And eventually, after your finite blocks have reached their limit, you have to start pulling from the bottom and placing them on top, as you can see there, right? You lay three and then you lay three and whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And so you've got to be very careful with the blocks that you remove, because if you remove the wrong block, the whole thing, the whole structure can come tumbling down. Nobody wants that. Then you lose the game. Everything's terrible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's take this off your screen. Boom and boom. We want to determine today, let's see here. I don't know why. Oh, there we go. We want to determine who the Jenga piece on the Dallas Cowboys roster is. And by that, I mean, who is the most important player? Who is the person that if we were to remove them for whatever reason, the whole structure would come tumbling down? It's a different way of asking who the most important player is, but even asking who the most important doesn't quite encompass the point that we're trying to make. We're trying to determine who is the player that if you remove them, if they're not a part of the overall equation, if they're not a part of the structure, too much depends on them and everything all of a sudden implodes from within. Now, two stipulations, I should add. This whole exercise was inspired by the great Dave Dameshek. Dave Dameshek, way back long ago on the DDFP, the Dave Dameshek football program, a podcast at NFL Media. Dave is somebody who inspired me a long time ago when I was trying to get into this world, and I listened to his podcast every single episode. It was fantastic. And so this was a Dameshek-ism, something that he still continues today. He does a lot of wonderful work. I can't recommend Dave Dameshek from a football or life consumption standpoint. So this is his IP, if we're being honest. So now that we've saluted Dave, something that he notes, something that Dameshek has noted, is that we should all be adult enough, we should all be mature enough to say that quarterbacks are obviously the most important Jenga piece, right? You take away Dak Prescott, even if you think he sucks, the fact that he's the quarterback, the fact that he's the most influential player on the team, the fact that he touches the ball each and every single play means that he is the Jenga piece. And this goes for, Drake May is the Jenga piece of the New England Patriots. JJ McCarthy is the Jenga piece of the Minnesota Vikings, right? Like, we understand that the quarterbacks are the Jenga pieces in a totality sort of perspective for their teams because they are the quarterback. So this is a non-quarterback conversation. We understand that Dak Prescott is the most important player because of the position he plays. So we're removing the quarterback from the discussion and the conversation entirely. That being said, I have 5 suggestions, 5 candidates for who the Jenga piece for the Dallas Cowboys is, or Jenga piece is, or whatever, for the 2025 version of this team. So let's go ahead and take a look. First up here, in a bit of news, it was noted on Thursday that Harrisburg High School is going to be retiring Micah Parsons' number 23. It's pretty cool. I mean, the tweet that you're looking at from PA Preps here says, no Harrisburg Cougar will wear number 23 again, as the school is set to honor one of the best football players in the history of Central Pennsylvania, that number 23. I'm not a fan of Micah wearing number 11, if we're clear. I'm not a fan of any, pass rusher wearing number 11 in the NFL. I think that's stupid. I hate this whole world, but thank God he's not wearing 23. That would be way, 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 way worse. At least 11 has a bit of a story relative to obviously what Micah did at Penn State. That being said, it goes without saying that Micah Parsons is the most important Jenga piece to the Cowboys. Even this feels chalk, though. This feels like cheating, right? This feels like, well, no, duh. He's the best player on the team. And so therefore, without him, you're not at your best possible version. And it would stand to reason that because he's so good, because he is the best player on the team, because he's the most important Jenga piece, that, I don't know, you wouldn't, be piddling around with getting a contract extension done for him. But I digress. We've had that conversation a number of times. Micah Parsons is without question the most important Jenga piece. But again, it is also worth noting that he is a defensive player. And I don't mean to say defense doesn't matter. Defense obviously very clearly matters. Defense is super duper important. But I mean, it is still not the side of the ball that drives the NFL in 2025. This isn't an attack on defense. This is simply saying that we can also even look at just this past year when Micah missed games. And please don't take this in a different way and say that the Cowboys had, I wouldn't say had some success, but they were able to survive without Micah Parsons. And to be clear, just because you can survive doesn't mean that you're good. It still, is a world. This is a world where Micah is the most important Jenga piece, but he is, again, part of the reactionary side of the ball. He's the very best part of it. He's the very best reactionary side of the ball player across the entire NFL. But I think that is worth noting. And again, kind of a chalk thing. Feels kind of silly to say that, Micah is the Jenga piece because he's so good, blah, blah. I know that we all know that. And so I wanted to get it out of the way because it's chalk. Now, this next one is chalk as well. But for my money, this is the real answer. CeeDee Lamb is the Jenga piece on the Dallas Cowboys roster. Without him, I mean, what? Like what do they look like without him? And granted, without him, they have George Pickens now. And so that kind of answers this question. That kind of helps the situation not be so dire, not be so, panic inducing, not be so terrifying, whatever. But without CeeDee Lamb, we agree this is an offense-driven league. That's the point we just made relative to Micah Parsons a moment ago. Without CeeDee Lamb, you are not a functional offense. Without CeeDee Lamb, you are not an offense that can get things done. Without CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, who is the most important player, right, is significantly suppressed because his number one pass catching option is not available to him, right? Without CeeDee Lamb, and that is something that we have not really seen. And I'm certainly not trying to tempt fate or trying to be silly or anything like that, but we have seen this team operate over the last half decade now at this point, at times without Dak Prescott. We've seen them operate for a cup of coffee, if you will, without Micah Parsons. We've seen them operate without DeMarcus Lawrence. And again, I'm not saying that CeeDee Lamb has never missed a game, but he has never missed sustained time in the way that others have. And so we've never really had to kind of, since he became CeeDee Lamb, we've never really had to watch them try to live without him. We have watched them struggle when trying to live with him, right? That was the whole conversation behind you have to get a proper wide receiver too. You have to get a running mate. You have to get the Robin to his Batman. And so my point is they went and got Robin. And I hate to minimize George Pickens that way because he's very, very, very important and very, very good and very talented and a number one receiver in his own right. But without Batman, you don't have Batman, right? Again, not to say that George Pickens is Robin, but you have to have Batman, and that is who CeeDee Lamb is. Without him, the whole situation falls apart. Without CeeDee Lamb, the offense completely and totally implodes. Imagine that world. I mean, imagine a world, even with George Pickens on the field, even with George Pickens being a serviceable player for the Cowboys. You've got Dak Prescott, George Pickens, and then what else? All these conversations that we've had ever since the Cowboys traded for Pickens, these conversations that have been about, Jake Ferguson's going to eat now and the running game's going to do well. I saw Mina Kimes was making a great point on her podcast about how it doesn't, I'm generalizing and paraphrasing, but it doesn't necessarily really matter who the Cowboys running back is, because teams are not going to be able to stack the boxes against them because of the fact that Dallas has both CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens for them to contend with from, a defensive standpoint, which is, again, why we've been saying that you have to find somebody to pair with CeeDee Lamb, but whatever. That being said, you take CeeDee away and it all falls down, right? This entire thing comes crumbling down. Now, all of a sudden, your running back does matter. Now, all of a sudden, Jake Ferguson has to be even better. Now, all of a sudden, George Pickens has to become Batman. And not only has to become Batman if you don't think he is one already, but he has to be both Batman and Robin simultaneously. Now, Dak Prescott has to be an even larger version of himself. Now, the offensive line has to provide him that extra half second. Like, there's no doubt about it that CeeDee Lamb, to me, is the most important Jenga piece. You take him away and they cannot do things. You take him away, they cannot score points. You take him away and you can even have Micah Parsons fully and totally in his bag at an absolute Micah Parsons level week in and week out, and it still might not be enough because offense matters that much in the NFL. So if we define a Jenga piece to be, if we define a Jenga piece relative to an NFL roster to be the most important thing, what everything depends on, and we acknowledge that quarterback is its own individual thing, and it's obviously the most important position in and of itself, so we exclude it from this conversation. So we're talking about who is the Jenga piece, who is the person, who is the block, who is the piece that everything rests upon. Maybe not everything rests upon, but the piece that if you remove it, it's so important to the integrity of the structure that it is all going to come tumbling down. There is zero doubt in my mind, quarterback excluded once again, that when you're having that conversation about the Dallas Cowboys, your answer, your Jenga piece is CeeDee Lamb. He is that essential. What he provides, what he offers, elevates everybody around him. He elevates the offense in a way that a lot of players, not only currently, but in franchise history, haven't. He is that special. So you take CeeDee Lamb away and the tower, in a proverbial sense, comes tumbling down the way the hit game Jenga does. He is the Jenga piece on the 2025 Dallas Cowboys. He's number one in my book. And we already talked, obviously, about Micah Parsons. I think it's kind of a 1A, 1B situation, but I do think that there are other players to get to. I mentioned that I had 5 options. And I think you have to say that this is, I mean, you could sell me that Tyler Guyton is higher than number 2 on this list. You could sell me, higher than number 3 on this list. You could sell me that Tyler Guyton is, in fact, I've said this in several articles and several social posts and things we've done. There's an argument to be made, or a way to put this, where you can say that Tyler Guyton is the most important player to the Cowboys. And I know that we have just said this sentence, but let me put it this way. Tyler Guyton plays left tackle. And so again, like when you're having the conversation about Jenga pieces, there are some positions that are inherently more valuable: quarterback, wide receiver, left tackle, pass rusher, corner, right? Like these are the money 5 positions, right? They're paid the way they are because they matter so substantially to the success of your NFL team. That being said, Tyler Guyton did not have an all-pro rookie season. That's not worth panicking over. We understand that. The Cowboys are at a place now where they are significantly depending on him becoming the player that they envisioned he was when they took him in the first round last year. That's just the facts of it all, right? Tyler Guyton has to reach an elite level for this all to work. It's imperative. It's a prerequisite for the offense to not only just become viable and sustainable, but for the offense to become legitimate enough to the point that it is challenging to be the best in the NFL, to the point that it can carry the team overall, to the point that it can live up to the defensive side of the ball if you believe that it's going to, kind of stay true to the form that it's had over the last few years. All of that rests on Tyler Guyton playing very well at left tackle, not becoming the best left tackle in the NFL, but improving upon who he was as a rookie. That simply must happen. Without that prerequisite, you can't take the next course. That's what this is about. You can't become these things if your left tackle is not reaching the place that you need him to. And that's where the Cowboys are at. This isn't to say he's a bust. This isn't to say he's not going to get there. This isn't to cast any kind of negative dispersion. This is simply to say that if you're having the conversation about Jenga pieces, players who are critically important to the success of the Cowboys, players who without them, the tower comes tumbling down, I think you absolutely have to include Tyler Guyton in this conversation. And some of that obviously is because he plays the position of left tackle. Some of that is because Dak Prescott inherently depends on him. Some of that is because he was the team's first round pick a year ago, right? Like all of these things, all of the math kind of suggests the flow chart of it all takes you to a place where you say, yeah, this dude has to have a big year if this offense is going to have a big year. That's just the way that this all kind of works at this point in time. Now, can that happen? I think we all believe it certainly can. Will it happen? Obviously, nobody knows that, but it is essential to the Cowboys operation in 2025 that Tyler Guyton takes a step. We talk about Tyler Booker a lot. The reality of the fact that he's a rookie, the reality of the fact that he plays along the interior. This isn't to say that right guard isn't important. The Cowboys just watched a Hall of Fame right guard retire, and we were all pretty bummed about it. This isn't to minimize what Tyler Booker can or will do for this team, but this is simply to say that his placement in the Jenga tower is a little bit different. There are less, structure pieces relying upon him, right? There are so many more pieces relying from a weight dispersion standpoint on Tyler Guyton than there are Tyler Booker at this point in time. That will change, that will move, that will fluctuate, obviously, over the course of their respective careers. But Tyler Guyton absolutely must become a foundational member of this team. When we do the kind of post op, when we do the the look back, when we do the I don't know, rear view assessment, when we are re-examining the 2025 season for the Dallas Cowboys, right? When we're checking it all out and saying like, okay, this worked, this didn't work, whatever, blah blah. And I ask you, who were the 5 best players on this team? If it's a successful season, Tyler Guyton will be on that list. If it is a year in which the Cowboys did something significant, if it's a year in which the Cowboys achieved something, that isn't to say won the Super Bowl, but if they had a modicum of serious success, then Tyler Guyton will be one of those 5 players. It's that important of a situation. It's that important of a position. It's that important of a sequence that the Cowboys have to get right at this point in time. They have to land this particular plane. It's, again, I don't say this to say or imply or infer that Tyler Guyton hasn't been awesome. He did not have the same rookie year that other offensive linemen have had for this team in the last 15 years. And that's okay, right? It's okay to say and understand that Zach Martin and Travis Frederick and even Tyron Smith to a different degree set an incredibly high bar, and to say that, that was pretty rare and that most players are not going to be able to sail over that, right? We got pretty spoiled. I think we understand that at this point in time, but Tyler Guyton has to take a significant step in 2025 if this team is going to be successful in an overall macro sort of standpoint. So, okay, we've talked about 2 or 3, goodness gracious, 3 different players. We have 2 players remaining. That is the math relative to Jenga pieces for the Cowboys, because I think there are several, right? Like when it comes to the game of Jenga, and it's not a game I play a lot, to be fully honest with you, but when it comes to that idea, when it comes to Jenga, we understand, we acknowledge that there are different pieces that you can remove and they can have the same effect, right? Because if you remove one at the top and these pieces come tumbling down, the weight of it all, the flow of it all, the kind of inertia of it all, the gravity of it all is going to bring the whole thing down. Like, it doesn't have to be a piece at the bottom, right? That's where we can say like CeeDee Lamb might be a piece at the bottom. Micah Parsons might be a piece at the bottom. Tyler Guyton is a piece maybe like 2 or 3, rows higher. But there are other pieces in which they could bring down the tower with them. So next on my list, because I do have 5 players, is George Pickens. Now, I don't mean bring the team down. I know that I was against this trade, and I have been honest with you and said that the reason for that was I was worried about how the Cowboys would be able to handle the things that Pittsburgh found to be annoying about him. All to this point, everything seems great. Everything seems copacetic. Everything seems kumbaya. And I'm very happy to, be looking for crow. I'm about to go to Costco and get like a seriously large amount of crow because I deserve to eat it. So I don't mean that George Pickens can tear the Cowboys down from within because of his personality. That's not my point. I'm talking just about football, right? We talked about and have been talking about how important he is. And we've had this conversation already with CeeDee Lamb. We've been talking about how important, how foundationally important George Pickens and what he represents is to the Cowboys. You have to have this running mate for CeeDee Lamb. You have to have this player opposite of CeeDee Lamb. You have to have this guy, this threat, this just simply other person to command attention in the offense. It cannot just be CeeDee Lamb the way that it was in both the 2024 and 2023 seasons. We talked a lot. I know I talked a lot here at Blog on the Boys and on social media and on videos and podcasts and different articles that I wrote about how the Cowboys just kind of went with, CeeDee Lamb, and that was it. For a moment, the Cowboys had Tony Pollard. That was it. Tony Pollard was the other legitimate threat opposite of CeeDee Lamb, who the Cowboys had going on as somebody that could, be a difference maker. And the moment that changed, the moment that became irrecoverable for them was the 2022 divisional round game against San Francisco. When Tony Pollard got hurt in that game, when the hip drop tackle and all that stuff, from that moment until the trade of George Pickens, they did not have a serious threat in the offense outside of CeeDee Lamb, which makes the season that CeeDee had in 2023 all the more remarkable. And I give Tony Pollard a lot of credit, obviously, for playing and trying as hard as he did in 2023 for this team, but he simply wasn't the same player. I think we all understand that. I interviewed Tony Pollard at the Super Bowl. If you're at Blog on the Boys, you saw that here on our channel. The Super Bowl 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, to be clear, the one in Las Vegas between San Francisco and Kansas City. And he said that he did not fully feel like himself in that 2023 season until the Cowboys went to Carolina and beat the Panthers. And from that moment on, there are all sorts of PFF metrics and all sorts of data and all sorts of just analysis and information in general that supports from that moment to the end of the season, he was one of the better running backs in the NFL. Now, I know his year in Tennessee last year didn't exactly knock anybody over and make them feel like the Cowboys were missing somebody special and blah, blah, blah. But my point is, by Tony Pollard's own admission, I mean, that game was in November. That was the game, if you recall, in which Jerry Jones announced that Jimmy Johnson was going into the Ring of Honor. And so it took until like almost Thanksgiving for the Cowboys to have some semblance of a threat opposite of CeeDee Lamb in 2023, which was a season in which they were very good. And so I say all that to say it has been a very, very, very long time since the Cowboys have had two offensive weapons that can do damage. And Tony Pollard, as amazing as he was at the end of the day a running back. Now, he was a running back who was involved in the pass game, and certainly when you think about his most significant contributions, you're talking about the 2022 season. And I mean, he had that run that was so special, and that Minnesota game was just such a great example of what he could do. It has been, a minute. It has been like a generation since the Cowboys have had two players of this ilk from a purely pass catching standpoint. And that's why George Pickens is so important. He isn't the same level of Jenga piece to me in that if you take him away, this team completely and totally fails, because we've literally seen them have success without this addition. But he is so critical in that he now takes them to a new place, right? Like it's kind of I'm trying to think of what it's like. It's kind of I mentioned recently here that when I was driving through West Texas last week or 2 weeks ago, I stopped at Slovacek's, which is a must. If you ever travel through the Lone Star State, you got to stop in West. You got to stop at Slovacek's, and you got to get this sausage. I absolutely love it. In fact, I'm going to show you a picture. I wasn't planning on this, but this is that important. You have to understand it. And Slovacek's, if you're listening, I'll fully take a sponsorship. We'll figure this out. Slovacek's has this sausage. It's garlic and pepper jack cheese sausage, and it is as incredible as it sounds. If you look here, this is a picture. I took this, the first one I smoked on my Pit Boss. It is infused with garlic and pepper jack cheese. I mean, think about that. Like, it's amazing. Like, it sounds amazing, and it is amazing. And so because it's only accessible in West, you can't buy this at any local grocery store. You can't order it online. So when I drive through West Texas, when I'm with my family and we stop, I make sure I've got an ice chest and I load up, because I've got to have enough, right, to sustain me until my next trip through the area. And so I say all that to say, right now, because that trip was 2 weeks ago for me, my fridge is stocked. In fact, I smoked 2 links last night, and it was awesome. We were having some cod for dinner. I felt like throwing some sausage in. It was amazing. And that meal for me was elevated, right? That cod is fine. I have no issue with cod. This analogy is working as I'm kind of building it in my mind, or not even in my mind, out loud. Cod is a fine meal. We had cod, sweet potato, broccoli, super healthy, super great, but it wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't going to be enough because I've had that meal before and then still been left a little bit hungry. So what did I do in anticipation? I smoked 2 links from Slovacek's, and it made the meal sing. It made the meal work. And George Pickens is the Slovacek sausage in this situation. Without it, the meal would have been fine. I would have survived, right? I would have established, territory from all major food groups, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I ultimately probably would have just eaten a snack later in the evening. But because I had the Slovacek's, it was amplified. It was even better. And I do not want to lose that ever again. I'm already having panic attacks about running out of the sausage. And so that's what George Pickens is. He's a Jenga piece of that variety, and that without him, the meal still works. but it is not as good as you want it to be in this particular moment in time. And that's why George Pickens is Jenga piece number 4 for me. But there are 5, as I mentioned. And I said this whole thing is kind of a chalk discussion because you're talking about the most important players on a team, or the most critical, foundational, the nucleuses, the catalytic players, if you will. And so in that sense, you're generally talking about money 5 positions, right? So far, we've excluded the quarterback and Dak Prescott, but we started off with a pass rusher and Micah Parsons. We got to the left tackle in Tyler Guyton. We obviously talked about 2 receivers in both CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. And I'm going to run chalk and throw a corner out there, but it's not going to be Trayvon Diggs. I think that if we're having the Jenga piece discussion, if we're talking about who is ultimately, without them, I mean, the string gets tugged, right? And it begins to come unraveled. I think the answer is DaRon Bland. And this isn't to say that he's better than Trayvon Diggs, but this is to say that right now, as of July 10th, we don't know what we're getting out of Trayvon Diggs, right? We all kind of feel that way. We all understand we need to see how is he starting training camp on the PUP list, right? Like, how long does it take for him to come off of it? If that's the case, is there any possibility of him missing time? How a part of the future is he? And I recognize you can have some of these, general conversations about DaRon Bland too, right? Like, he's needing a contract extension. It's a contract year for him at the moment. Is he going to return to the form that he had last year prior to the foot fracture? Like, all this stuff. But my point is, like, he is the more reliable option to me. Like, I think the most reliable corner on this team right now is DaRon Bland. And I'm, a little bit shocked that I feel that way. There we go. I mean, DaRon Bland in that sense is very, very, very important. He is critical. Again, that word has come up a lot in this conversation because, shocker here, the whole, if a tower comes crumbling down, that's a critical situation. You don't want that to happen. And so that being said, how would you feel? Like, if you don't agree with this, like, think about that. Ask yourself that question. I'm asking you that question. How would you feel about the state of this defense if DaRon Bland were not a part of the team? I think you'd be nervous, right? I think you would feel like, well, Trayvon, certainly has potential, and but I have questions about that. You'd feel like Savon Ravel has a lot of potential, but is he starting on the PUP list, right? Like, okay, Kyrie Elam, they have a lot of faith in, but I don't know if he's going to be the player he was at Florida. By the way, thank you to everyone. I didn't say anything on YouTube, but I will now. I shared this on social media on Wednesday. It's just personal news for me, but related to my professional life, obviously. This fall, I'm starting a master's program with the University of Florida. So go Gators, let's go, baby. With a focus on digital journalism and multimedia storytelling. And so I'm very excited for that. So I'm excited to see what kind of develops out of that. But so because of that, I ride for Kyrie Elam now. Go Gators, baby. It's great to be a Florida Gator. That being said, if you did not have DaRon Bland, I think that you would feel uneasy. You would feel nervous. You would feel shaky. You would feel like, this could work. I mean, I kind of feel that way now, like, even with DaRon Bland, as a part of the conversation. So if I were to remove him, I would feel really, on some loose foundation. And to me, that proves that DaRon Bland is a Jenga piece. He's number 5 for me. And given that we only had 2 defensively, I think that's interesting perspective, that the 2 defensive players who we believe are the most critical Jenga pieces, or whatever, at least if you run in line with my thought process here, that they're both entering contract years, right? That's kind of funny. It's the way that this team does things sometimes. So hey, now, whatever. So this was fun. I love thinking about things this way. And again, a shout out to Dave Damashek, who coined this idea many, many, many moons ago. I'm very curious and interested and anxious to hear who your Jenga pieces are, who you think the Jenga pieces are on the Dallas Cowboys roster. So please let me know. You can hit me up on social media, X, Instagram, Threads at RJ Ochoa, TikTok, rj.ochoa. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can like my Facebook page, search for RJ Ochoa in either place. You can search for RJ Ochoa on Blue Sky. Subscribe right here to the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. This is our 3rd video out on the week. I'm going to be having more live shows on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel as football season gets back, starting with training camp. So if live things are more your cup of tea, they're back. I know we've had some weird things happening lately. Don't worry. making sure that you're taking care of here on YouTube. So subscribe, like the video. If you're on Bleacher Report, follow, all that fun stuff. If you are cooking out over the weekend, I very clearly hope that you have some Slovacek sausage in your life. And so, yeah, if you are watching on YouTube, please let me know whether you were live or after the fact, if everything went well, because we did get this off the ground, I think, relative to the co-streaming situation. Quite proud of myself. Feel like Tony Stark with everything that I've done here today. But I'll see you guys on the flippity flip next time. And thank you so much for hanging out. We will see you next time.